My name is Camille Rhodes, and the night everything shifted for me started with what should have been a simple family celebration. I didn't walk into that house expecting trouble, just another gathering where I did most of the work while everyone else acted like things magically arranged themselves. For years, I'd been the one silently keeping my parents afloat, fixing their broken sink at midnight, covering small bills they couldn't manage, stepping in every time they needed just a little help. And I never complained. I thought that was just my place in the family. That evening, the plan was to celebrate my sister's latest milestone, so I got there early, helped set the table, made sure the food stayed warm, the usual. She arrived late, of course, but the moment she walked through the door, everyone acted like the only reason the night existed was for her. Compliments flew across the living room faster than she could catch them. I kept my head down until a relative leaned close and said almost casually, "Your sister really carries this family's pride, doesn't she?" It was a small comment, but it hit harder than it should have. I forced a smile and excused myself, telling them I needed to grab more napkins upstairs. I just needed space to breathe. When I reached the top of the stairs, I noticed the home office door slightly open. The light was on, and a stack of documents lay across the desk like someone had been in a hurry. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But something about the folder sitting right on top pulled me in before I could think twice. A feeling sharp and sudden tightened in my chest as soon as I stepped closer, like some part of me already knew whatever was inside wasn't meant for my eyes. And I was right. Before I tell you what I saw in that folder, make sure you follow, because what I found changed everything I believed about my family. I pushed the door open just enough to slip inside, telling myself I only needed a charger cable I'd forgotten earlier, nothing more. But the moment I stepped into the office, something felt off. The room wasn't messy yet. The way one folder sat perfectly aligned at the center of the desk made it impossible to ignore. The label caught my eye instantly. Miles Rhodes. My dad's full name printed in sharp black ink. It should have been harmless, boring paperwork, the kind he always avoided. Still, something in my gut tightened. I reached for the folder, trying to convince myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. The second it opened, all the background noise from the party vanished. Right there on the first page, centered like a punch to the chest, were the words, "Full transfer of assets to April Rhodes." I froze, staring at the line until it stopped feeling real. My finger traced the text as if it might change if I blinked long enough. It didn't. Below it was a detailed list: house, savings, investment accounts, retirement funds. Even the car Miles babied more than he ever babied either of us. Every item pointed to one person, April. Not shared, not conditional. Not even a small note saying I'd be included somewhere. Nothing. It felt like someone had reached inside my ribs and squeezed tight. I tried to swallow, but the back of my throat burned. April was my sister, but she wasn't the one who sent money when the water heater broke or helped cover groceries when Mom said the budget was a little tight. She wasn't the one driving across town every time something needed fixing. Yet here was the official record of who truly mattered. I closed the folder carefully, making sure it looked untouched. My legs felt stiff on the way down the stairs, like each step pulled me deeper underwater. When I reached the living room again, the laughter, music, and clinking glasses hit me all at once, but none of it felt connected to me anymore. April was in the center of everything, glowing like a spotlight followed her. She lifted a glass while relatives praised her determination and resilience, words that sounded almost rehearsed. I took a seat near the edge of the room, forcing myself to stay composed while every part of me replayed what I'd just read. A few minutes later, I caught Mom talking to a couple of aunts. Her tone was soft, almost proud, as she said April's been through a lot. She needs long-term security. It's only right we make sure she's protected. Dad nodded beside her, agreeing easily, like the decision was obvious to everyone but me. Their voices blended with the party noise, but the message cut straight through. They had decided April needed everything, not because she earned it, but simply because they said so. And me, I wasn't even part of the conversation. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask questions. I didn't pull them aside to explain the document sitting upstairs. I just watched them, and for the first time in my life, their favoritism didn't feel like a bad moment or a misunderstanding. It felt deliberate, thought out, signed and stamped. And as I sat there, the realization settled deeper and deeper. None of this was accidental. They hadn't just chosen her tonight. They had chosen her long before I ever walked into that office. I barely slept after leaving the party. Every time I closed my eyes, the words, "full transfer of assets to April Rhodes," flashed like a sign I couldn't unsee. I kept turning from side to side, replaying the night, replaying their voices, replaying the way the room buzzed around her, while I sat there holding the truth like a secret bruise. By the time the sun came up, the exhaustion felt wired instead of dull. I stood in my kitchen slowly making coffee, and somewhere between the first sip and the second, a calm decision settled into place. I wasn't going to keep funding a family that didn't include me in their future. They had already chosen who mattered. They could live with that choice. The days after that felt strangely quiet. Mom called that afternoon asking if I could stop by the pharmacy to pick up something really quick. Her tone was sweet, the way it always was when she wanted something done without saying she wanted it. For years, that tone worked on me, pulling me into endless errands I never complained about. This time, I answered with a steady, simple, "I can't today." She hesitated long enough for me to picture her blinking in confusion, but she brushed it off and said she'd figure it out. I didn't explain myself. I didn't add excuses. I let the silence sit exactly where it belonged. 2 days later, she texted saying there was a weird noise in the garage, asking whether I could take a quick look. I stared at the message for a moment, feeling that old instinct, the one that pushed me into my car at any hour, try to rise up. I shut it down. "I won't be able to help. You should call someone." She responded with a thumbs up emoji, the digital equivalent of a tight smile. Dad didn't comment on anything I wasn't doing. He probably assumed my schedule was hectic, or that I'd step back in once things calmed down. He'd always seen my help as something automatic, like a service that ran in the background. The absence of it didn't register immediately because he never saw the work in the first place. April, however, noticed. She sent me a picture of her celebrating another small achievement paired with a message about how some people can't stand to see others succeed. I let it sit unread for hours before opening it. I didn't reply. She tried again a few days later with a vague brag about how Mom and Dad always knew I'd be the responsible one in the long run. Responsible her. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the couch. Not engaging was strangely empowering. The month passed slowly but peacefully. I didn't drive across the city. I didn't pick up tools on weekends. I didn't send money ahead of their bills like some sort of unpaid safety net. Instead, I got used to reclaiming my time. I took long walks in the evenings, cooked meals I actually wanted to eat, and slowly felt a tightness in my chest unravel. For the first time in my adult life, my days weren't shaped around what they needed. They didn't realize anything was different. Mom sent casual updates but didn't ask why I wasn't around. Dad stayed silent except for occasional short messages about random news. April kept her usual tone, smug, shiny, unaware. But the distance I built held firm, and it felt better than anything I'd done for myself in years. Then one morning, as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror getting ready for work, my phone vibrated on the counter. I wiped my hands, picked it up, and saw Dad's name on the screen. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a check-in. It wasn't even early enough in the day for it to be casual. It was just a message he sent without hesitation, and the moment I opened it, everything about the past month narrowed into a single cold line of text. The message came in while I was tying my hair before leaving for work. I glanced at the screen without thinking, but the second I read the words, everything in me stilled. "The mortgage is due." 4 words. No greeting, no context, no acknowledgement that we hadn't spoken properly in a month. Just a command delivered like I was an employee who'd fallen behind on a task. I stared at the message longer than I expected, not out of confusion, but because of how predictable it was. They didn't check in. They didn't ask how I'd been. They only reached out the moment something needed to be paid. I typed back slowly, making sure I didn't soften it out of habit. You should ask April. I set my phone down and continued getting ready, but the reply came so quickly it sounded like an alarm. Stop being ridiculous. This is important. The lack of hesitation made my jaw tighten. To him, my role had never changed. I was the fallback, the fixer, the person who absorbed responsibility without being asked. I wrote back, I'm not responsible for the mortgage. The dots appeared immediately. Your sister can't handle something like this. You know that. I let the message sit. If she couldn't handle it, why had they trusted her with everything? Before I answered, the phone rang. Mom. I didn't want to pick up, but I knew she'd keep calling, so I pressed accept. Her voice came through tense and sharp around the edges. Camille, what is going on with you? Why would you send your father a message like that? I stayed calm. Because I can't help with the mortgage. She didn't even pretend to understand. You always help. Always. Your father is under so much pressure right now. You know money is tight. I didn't respond to the guilt she kept layering into her words. Mom, I'm not paying it. She exhaled loudly into the phone the way she always did when she was building her argument. This is how families work. We all pitch in. You've always been reliable. We shouldn't have to beg. Something about the word reliable hit harder than everything else. It wasn't a compliment. It was a role they'd carved out for me without asking. Ask April, I repeated. Mom's tone snapped. Your sister has enough on her plate. You're being unreasonable. I felt my hand tighten around the phone. She's inheriting the house. She can handle the payment. Mom went silent not because she understood, but because she had no script prepared for hearing it out loud. Don't bring that up, she finally said. This isn't about the will. It's absolutely about the will, I replied. She didn't deny it. Instead, she shifted her voice to wounded softness. We raised you. We've supported you through everything. And now, when we need help, you turn your back on us? I didn't bother defending myself. Their version of support had always been selective, and explaining that wouldn't change the story they preferred. I have to go, I said, ending the call, before she spiraled into another emotional plea. The silence didn't last. April's message came through with the subtlety of a brick. Wow. Mom is upset. Dad's furious. You could have handled this like an adult. I didn't respond, so another text arrived. If you're still mad about something from the party, grow up. You're making everything harder for no reason. Then a third mom says you're being selfish. Honestly, I agree. I set the phone aside, refusing to be pulled into their chaos. The pattern was so clear now it felt almost embarrassing that I hadn't seen it sooner. Dad gave orders. Mom layered guilt. April attacked from the sidelines. And all of it pointed toward one thing: they expected me to fund the life they built around her. More messages arrived in a stream, Dad accusing me of abandoning my family, Mom alternating between pleading and scolding, April chiming in whenever she needed attention. But none of it moved me. Their words didn't sting the way they used to. They only revealed the truth I had been avoiding for years. And as I finally silenced their notifications and set my phone down, one thought crystallized in a way I couldn't ignore. It's strange how one short message can show you exactly who you are in your own family. I heard the knock before I even reached the hallway, sharp and relentless, like someone trying to break a rhythm into the door. It wasn't the kind of knock neighbors used. When I looked through the peephole, my stomach sank. Dad, Mom, April, and Miles. All standing in front of my apartment like some sort of intervention squad. No warning, no text, no courtesy. They were lined up so tightly it felt like they were blocking out the entire hallway light. I opened the door only an inch. What are you doing here? Dad didn't waste a second. Open the door. We need to talk. We can talk right here, I said, keeping the chain on. Mom stepped forward, her expression a mix of accusation and forced concern. Camille, stop being dramatic. Let us in. I shook my head. No. April scoffed under her breath like she couldn't believe she had to stand in a hallway to deal with me. Miles looked down at the carpet, hands shoved in his pockets, clearly wishing he were invisible. Dad exhaled sharply. Your behavior is getting out of hand. We came all the way over here and you won't even let your own family inside. What do you want? I asked. Mom crossed her arms. We're not doing this through a crack in the door. Then don't do it, I replied calmly. Just tell me what you're here for. Dad leaned closer, lowering his voice as if the hallway might hear. The mortgage is overdue again. We need you to step up. Step up. As if the last decade had been a warm-up, Mom chimed in before I could answer. Your sister can't focus with all this stress. She needs stability, Camille. She can't lose the house. I stared at her. That's not my problem. Her face tightened. You're being heartless. April rolled her eyes dramatically. Seriously, just pay it. You always do. Why are you acting brand new? Because I am done, I said plainly. Dad's tone rose. You're acting selfish, Camille. We're under real pressure and you're choosing now to throw a tantrum. I almost laughed. A tantrum, I said, one sentence. Ask April. Mom shook her head. Your sister is more vulnerable than you. She needs security more than you do. April smirked like she had already won something. Yeah. I actually need the house. I looked at her. And you're inheriting it. So handle it. Her expression cracked for the first time, but Dad stepped in quickly. We didn't come here to fight. We came here because you owe it to this family to help. I don't owe you anything, I said. Mom gasped like I had hit her. We raised you and I supported all of you for years, I replied. I'm allowed to stop. April jumped in aggressively. You're jealous. That's all this is. No, I said, this is me refusing to be the backup plan. The air in the hallway grew tight. Dad's posture stiffened, his voice dropping. We made decisions based on what's best for this family. April needs more than you. That's your justification, I said. I'm just not buying it. April snapped. You weren't supposed to know about the will. That office is private. I raised an eyebrow. You seem awfully defensive. Mom's voice softened into manipulation mode. Honey, don't do this. You're hurting us. Dad added. If you would stop being emotional, you'd see we're asking for something reasonable. Reasonable, I repeated. You left me out of your entire future. April muttered. You're overreacting. I turned to her. You can call it whatever you want. I'm still not paying your mortgage. She opened her mouth, but Miles suddenly shifted. Dad glared at him. Don't say a word. Mom hissed. Miles, stay out of it. That made me look directly at him. Say it, I said quietly. Miles, say whatever you're thinking. He swallowed, hard eyes darting between us. April's stare was a warning. Dad's expression was a threat. Mom's was desperation. And maybe that pressure was exactly what pushed him over the edge. His shoulders slumped, and he spoke with a defeated honesty I'd never heard from him before. It was April's idea. The hallway felt too bright, too narrow, and too quiet after Miles slipped out that unfinished sentence. I looked straight at April, waiting for her to deny it with something that sounded believable, but her eyes darted sideways before she forced out, Miles misunderstood. He always does. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I caught it. So, what did he misunderstand? I asked. Because the way he said it sounded like this entire will situation started with you. Dad stepped forward, his tone sharp. Enough. We're not doing this, Mom added. You're attacking your sister over nothing. This is exactly the problem, Camille? I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on April. Say it clearly, I said. Did you pressure them? April crossed her arms, chin lifted. I didn't pressure anyone. I explained my situation. That's not the same thing. Your situation, I repeated. Mom jumped in. She needed reassurance, Camille. She was emotionally vulnerable. Dad nodded. We had to give her something stable. You don't understand because you've always been so independent. There it was again, that line, as if independence was a crime, as if it meant I had forfeited being part of the family without being told. April seized the moment. You've always built your own life. You don't need anything from them, so why act like you suddenly care about what goes where? I felt a wave of disbelief rise in me. I care because it shows what you all think my place is. Miles opened his mouth again, hesitating. Something in his expression told me he wasn't done. I turned to him. Tell me the rest. Dad barked. Miles, not another word. Mom pleaded, Sweetheart, don't make this worse. April glared at him like she could burn holes in his shirt. Miles, she hissed, shut up. That sealed it. He lifted his hands helplessly. She told you she'd break down if you didn't give her everything. She made it sound like your responsibility to fix her life forever. April snapped back instantly. Are you kidding me? You're twisting everything. I only told them how stressed I was. You're blowing it out of proportion because you want to look like the reasonable one for once. Mom moved closer to her, protective and unwavering. She has been through enough. All she ever needed was a sense of security, and we were trying to give her that. Dad added, It's not like you've ever needed us. You make your own money, you handle your own life, and you don't rely on anyone. You made your choices. I stared at them, feeling something settle inside me, not anger, not sadness, but understanding. So that's the logic. Because I don't depend on you. I don't deserve anything you consider family. April scoffed. You're being dramatic. This was never about punishing you. Then why exclude me? I asked plainly. Why go behind my back? Why pretend everything is equal when it's clearly not? The tension finally snapped. They all talked at once. Dad lecturing me about being too rigid, Mom begging me to stop making a scene. April insisting she earned stability, and Miles attempting to speak over them with small bursts of honesty that cracked open even more truth. Their voices echoed down the hallway until doors slowly cracked open. Neighbors leaned out, watching with that familiar mix of discomfort and curiosity reserved for family drama no one wants, but everyone listens to. I felt every gaze, every whispered comment, every judgment swirling around us, but none of it mattered anymore. I looked at them, the people who raised me, the sister who didn't hesitate to take whatever she could get, the brother who accidentally unraveled everything, and something inside me clicked into brutal clarity. You didn't come here to talk, I said quietly, cutting through their shouting. You came here because you finally realized I'm no longer the person you can depend on without giving anything back. Their voices faltered like someone had pulled the plug on their outrage. I kept going. You wrote me out because it was easy. You expected me to keep helping anyway because that's who I've been to you. But that version of me, she's done. April looked stunned. Mom looked terrified, Dad looked furious, and Miles looked relieved in the way someone does when truth finally lands where it belongs. I reached for my door. We're finished, I said. Then I stepped inside and closed it, the latch sliding into place while their voices tangled together in the hallway, muffled and powerless on the other side. After the chaos in the hallway faded and the apartment settled into an almost unnatural quiet, I realized there was still one thing left unfinished. If my parents and April wanted to twist the truth privately, I couldn't stop them, but I could make sure the people who had always orbited around our family, the ones who saw glimpses of everything growing up, knew exactly what had happened. Not to expose anyone, not to gather pity, just to finally put the truth in writing. I opened my laptop and stared at the blank email for a long moment before typing the first line. I wrote to the small circle of relatives who had been present throughout birthdays, holidays, and the years when our family dynamic had always looked normal from the outside. I began simply explaining that I wasn't reaching out for sympathy or to stir conflict. Then I laid out the facts stripped of emotion and ornament. I explained that for years I had quietly stepped in whenever Dad and Mom needed financial help, usually without being asked twice, covering utility shortages, repairing things that broke, helping with medical costs, and filling in the gaps that appeared too often to be coincidences. I didn't mention the sacrifices behind those choices. They weren't the point. I moved on to the moment I found the will. I described it plainly, a document transferring every major asset, home savings, investments, and personal property solely to April, leaving me entirely removed from any consideration. I wrote how I was never told about it, never consulted, never given so much as a conversation. Then I explained the message that followed a month later when Dad contacted me, only to ask for money toward the mortgage, without greeting, acknowledgement, or even a note about how I was doing. I made it clear I wasn't seeking validation. I only wanted them to understand why I had chosen to step back and why I could no longer continue supporting a structure that excluded me while demanding my help. I ended the message with a single straightforward sentence: I can no longer offer financial support in a situation where I am not regarded as an equal member of this family. When I finally hit send, I didn't expect a quick response, but my inbox started lighting up within minutes. A cousin who rarely spoke up wrote that he'd always noticed how much my parents leaned on me, and that he respected me for finally drawing a boundary. An aunt wrote a long, heartfelt email saying she wished she had checked on me sooner because she always sensed I carried more weight than anyone acknowledged. Another relative, usually diplomatic to a fault, sent a message saying that families shouldn't reward dependency while punishing responsibility, and that what had happened wasn't just unfair, it was unacceptable. More replies came, in each one surprisingly unified support, understanding, and a kind of quiet outrage on my behalf. No one blamed me. No one suggested I was being dramatic. They understood the difference between abandoning a family and refusing to be taken advantage of. Then an email from April appeared. I opened it expecting denial or anger, but what I found was worse: a long defense filled with claims that I had misread everything, that the will was temporary, that she'd been emotionally vulnerable, and that my message had turned the family against her. She said I had embarrassed her and created a false narrative, but not once did she acknowledge what she'd done or how she'd influenced our parents. It was an attempt to recast herself as the injured party in a story she orchestrated. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to untangle, nothing left to argue, nothing worth clarifying. Her words no longer had weight. I closed her email without saving it and let the quiet fill the room again, realizing something inside me had shifted. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel doubt. I felt free. Once the hallway shouting faded from my mind, the first thing I did was cut off every line that connected me to them. I didn't wait for another excuse or another dramatic attempt to pull me back into a role I never volunteered for. Their numbers went on my block list one by one, and for the first time in my adult life, my phone felt like it belonged to me instead of being an alarm system tied to their needs. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It felt earned. I let myself sit with it until I knew exactly what I wanted to do next, and when the clarity came, it was simple. I was done trying to survive in a family that treated me like a resource. I found a new place across town, a neighborhood where I could walk down the street without worrying about running into someone who heard something or wanted to offer unsolicited advice. Packing didn't take long. Most of what I owned fit into a few boxes because I had never allowed myself to collect anything too fragile or sentimental. When you grow up in a family that sees your usefulness instead of your presence, you learn not to attach too strongly to things. The new apartment was smaller, older, and nothing special to anyone except me. To me, it meant freedom. Meanwhile, the consequences of my absence reached them faster than I expected. Without the quiet flow of payments I had always covered, responsibilities started piling up around them in ways they could no longer ignore. My parents had spent years convincing themselves that April needed more support, but the truth became unavoidable once they had to rely solely on her. Bills didn't pause out of sympathy. Repairs didn't wait for convenience. My cousin mentioned in a tone that suggested even he was tired of watching the chaos that my parents ended up selling a small piece of land they had been holding on to for sentimental reasons. It was the first of several adjustments they had to make just to keep up with the obligations they used to shrug off because they assumed I would manage them. As for April inheriting everything, turned out to be far less glamorous when the reality of maintaining it settled in. Mortgage payments, insurance, property taxes, unexpected house issues. Things I had handled quietly for years now stood in front of her like a list of exams she never studied for. And because she had spent so long positioning herself as the one who needed stability, she no longer had anyone left to hand the hard parts to. The strain seeped into her relationship with Miles. He tried to stay neutral, but neutrality doesn't work when the truth keeps surfacing in the middle of every argument. I wasn't there to watch the unraveling, but I didn't need to be. People who had built their comfort on someone else's effort don't stay steady when the foundation disappears. None of this brought me satisfaction. What I felt instead was confirmation, quiet, steady confirmation that walking away was the only move that ever made sense. I chose a life where I didn't have to brace myself for disappointment disguised as obligation. I woke up without waiting for the next demand. I cooked dinner in silence that felt peaceful instead of heavy. I paid my own bills with the comfort of knowing I wasn't simultaneously carrying someone else's. And at night, when I finally rested, I did it without replaying conversations that drained me. One evening, as I watched the city lights from my window, the truth settled in with a clarity I couldn't ignore. A family that needs you only when it benefits them is not a place where your worth can ever be recognized. In the end, Camille learned that a family built on favoritism is not a family she needed to stay loyal to, and walking away was the first real act of choosing herself. Thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.